Hello and welcome to Talkernate History, the podcast where we,
Matt
and Max, talk about works of alternate history scenarios, and history in general. This episode is the long-awaited Operation Unthinkable episode.
Yeah, it's exciting.
Yes.
Finally, we've gotten to it.
It's finally happening. So Operation Unthinkable, it's actually a British war plan from 1945 about a potential attack on the Soviet Union. Germany's been knocked out of the war, and the idea was that there would be an attack on the Soviet Union July 1st. And it's called Operation Unthinkable because nobody should have thought about this for more than 5 seconds because
it's crazy. I mean, the idea that in July of 1945, the Western Allies are going to fight the Soviets. Well, remember, the war in the Pacific is still going on. That's the first big issue here.
Okinawa is conquered at this point, right?
Yes, but the battle, Okinawa ends late June. Mm-hmm. Now the Allies, the Americans, are prepping for the invasion of southern Japan.
Mm-hmm. Operation Olympic or?
Operation Olympic. Operation Cornet is the one, the invasion of Honshu, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So Operation Olympic, people are getting... And remember, there's still fighting going on in the Philippines, actually, a little bit.
Really?
Yeah, not much, but... I mean, long story short is that the war in the Pacific does not look like it is going to end for a long time in July of 1945. Because remember, the Trinity test hasn't happened yet.
More than 2 weeks away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so you've got the war in the Pacific, and the Americans and British were counting heavily on the Soviets getting involved too, because they'd promised to get involved to distract the Japanese.
But that wouldn't happen until August. What, like August 6th or something
August
like that?
9th, I believe it's the day that they dropped. Was it Hiroshima or Nagasaki? It's one of the two. Maybe it's Hiroshima, August 6th, what they dropped. That it was the long story short on it, though, is that we still have the war against Japan. So why are you now starting another war against the Soviets, who were just your allies?
I'll tell you why. Because the idea is that the British were kind of pissed off about the fact Russians were seeming to be treating Poland like it was going to be just a satellite state of theirs, that it wasn't going to actually be a free and independent Poland as was negotiated earlier. So they were mad about that, so let's start World War III right now.
I know. So first of all, you have the Pacific issues, because now it's going to make it harder because the Soviets certainly aren't going to invade Japan to help you out.
Right, exactly.
But even more so is that you have the state of the armies, Western armies in Europe at that time. You have the British and American armies, but the Soviets way outnumber them. And I think maybe people are influenced by sort of Cold War ideas about the quality of the Red Army, but I'm going to be honest with you, is that the Red Army is the best army in the world in 1945. It's the most battle-hardened, it's the largest. Remember, the Soviets have just spent the last 4 years driving the Germans back from over 1,000 miles inside their country, back to Berlin itself, and even beyond it in some places. This is an army that destroyed the Wehrmacht, which is one of the best fighting forces. I mean, one of the most efficient fighting forces the world had seen. Soviet tanks are better. Soviet airplanes are somewhat equivalent. They don't have the strategic bombing force that the Western Allies do, but they outnumber them. Remember, the British are running out of manpower by this point.
Oh, yeah.
And the American focus is now going to the Pacific. Let's just say a hypothetical ground war breaks out in Germany. The Soviets have the advantages.
All of the advantages, really.
Yeah.
The idea for this to even succeed is to be on the attack, to defeat the USSR. And that's just, that can't happen. It's impossible.
Well, it is, yeah. And so talk about the quality of equipment, Russian tanks. T-34-85 is a better tank than the Sherman.
Yeah.
And maybe a Sherman 76, the Easy 8, something like that can stand up to it. But there's not that many still, remember? I mean, airplanes, the experience that the Russian army has, the chances is that the red tide is going to keep pushing west. and the problem is that what is the end result, I think, is probably the thing. So tactically, the chances is that the Allies are going to get pushed right back across the Rhine, and that you think the Soviets are going to stop. Remember, the Rhine only runs over the northern Netherlands. I mean, were the Allies going to get pushed back to the freaking English Channel? What gain is that? And then secondly, strategically, how do you defeat the Soviet Union? I mean, look at a map of how much of Russia the Germans occupied in World War II, and they still lost. They still got obliterated. I mean, you can't conquer Russia. It's like impossible. It just is.
Yeah.
I mean, what is it like? General Patton going to be driving into Moscow victorious in 1956? I mean, it's a war without end.
Exactly. Yes.
I mean, it's just what to gain is there from this? And there's no conceivable way the Allies win this war. I mean, people say Hitler lost the war on June the 22nd, 1941, the day they invaded the Soviet Union. Well, I mean, why would the Western Allies be any better at this?
Yeah, exactly. The Germans in 1940 were fighting an ill-prepared, badly deployed, low experience army. They've only got experience fighting the Finns, basically, and the Poles. So, they don't really know what they're doing. And they're starting from the middle of Poland. So this is starting from freaking past Berlin against people who know what they're doing, way more of them and way better equipped. It's just insanity. It's absolutely insanity.
And I mean, where the Allies have their advantages are strategic air power, which the B-29 can't get to Moscow. And, in the Navy. Oh, yes. So, good. So they can pummel Vladivostok into smithereens. Once you get around, Japan, where it's on the other side.
Which is still fighting.
Still fighting against you. So, okay, you sink some of the Soviet Navy, in the Baltic. Woo! I mean.
Good job.
Yeah, good job. Well, the thing is that this was a problem that American Cold War planners had, like in the 60s and 70s, which is just the advantages in manpower is in the Soviet hands. Just is.
Plus, you're talking about like strategic bombing. Like, what are you going to bomb? Eastern Germany?
Troop deployments, I guess.
Poland? Like, like...
Even if you... Strategic, what do you... Oh, yeah, B-29s in China. Well, are they going to bomb, parts of the Trans-Siberian Railroad? I mean, the heart of Russia is out of your reach. I mean, Baku. Okay, so from Iran, you're going to screw that up. And yes, Lend-Lease will be cut off, but like... Yes. Remember, the Red Army is at such a pitch at this point. This is the best it will ever be. And if the Germans couldn't stop them, why would the Allies be able to? And what were they going to gain by going to war with the Russians? Remember, Joe Stalin was Uncle Joe during World War II.
Right. So like 5 minutes ago, he was one of your best allies. Now he's the guy we're going to go into total war over. The people are not going to accept that. Like, people are going to get like really pissed off because it's like, I thought this war was over. And no, it's not.
Now this will be a war without end.
Screw you. Absolutely. Yeah, no. I'm not going to vote for you in the next election.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, there's no conceivable way this would happen. It's just, and the fact is the Allies would lose. They would lose. Western Allies would end this situation in a position, I'm not saying, all of Europe in Russian hands sort of thing, but they're going to end this war in a position worse than they were in May of 1945 at the end of the conflict against the Germans.
So something that I guess we should probably think about, though, is nuclear weapons, because just a couple weeks later, they would be able to use, the Trinity device. And did they have the other bombs ready at that point?
Yeah, basically, when Trinity was detonated, they basically had two others ready. They had Fat Man and Little Boy.
So, like, how are you going to use these? Against troop concentrations?
Yeah.
Against,
Oh, well, you can't bomb Moscow or Leningrad or Stalingrad.
A one-way trip,
I don't even know then. Even if you based a B-29, what's the most forward you could put it? Where are the most forward Allied air bases? I don't know if...
Norway, maybe?
Well, no, Norway is still under German occupation in May of 45.
Oh.
I mean, yes, I guess you could try that, but,
Well, this is July 1st, though. It's the proposed start of this. So, like...
Yeah. This is just, George Patton's craziness and Churchill. I mean, you understand why they thought up these plans. Well... we're worried about the Soviets, and I guess they did have reason to worry, but like, it just is not it's just not feasible.
And people could make the argument, if there was like a surprise nuclear attack against Moscow, let's say there was somewhere you could drop a bomb on top of it. I mean, okay, so you kill Joseph Stalin. All of the USSR is now incredibly pissed off. And all of their fears about capitalist encirclement is now 100% proven true.
Yeah.
You think they're just going to give up? Absolutely not.
No.
And also, Stalin knew about the nuclear bomb.
Of course they knew about it. They had spies in the program in the Manhattan Project. Well, the Germans knew about the Manhattan Project.
Wait, what? They had spies in it as well?
Not in it, but they knew something was happening. And I think they weren't sure, but they knew that there was this massive expenditure, and they knew there was these sites where work was being done. And I think some of them, I read somewhere, surmised correctly that they were working with some sort of atomic weapons program, but they weren't sure. But it was too big to conceal. I mean, yes, it was under all this secrecy and all that, but like that's a type of program that's too big to conceal in its size, in its scope. And the Soviets certainly knew about it.
So like, let's say war breaks out, Stalin might be thinking, I'm the target. I need to get the hell out of here. I've got to go to Kubashev, or I've got to go underground, or I got to hide.
Yeah,
There's no assassinating him with a nuclear bomb. It's not going to work.
It's just unthinkable is, I mean, interesting as a concept, but just never going to happen, not feasible. And if any war breaks out, it's going to be bad for the Western Allies. And remember, Central Europe is a mess in there. You've got massive numbers of DPs, displaced persons.
Yeah.
You've got armies that have just been fighting these massive wars. They're tired. They're exhausted. The area is devastated.
Like even after World War II, there's still tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people on borderline starving, trying to survive, you know, getting put in these camps and struggling to find enough food to feed everybody. And now you're going to start another war? How's that going to turn out? Not good. So the Western Allies do have a lot of German POWs that they could press into service.
Well, you know where most of them were kept? The United States.
That's right. You know what? Actually, my great grandfather had a farm where they had German POWs do work. They paid them.
If you ever go to, it's interesting. If you're in Europe, go to a German cemetery, World War II cemetery, and they'll list out like where all their cemeteries are. There's some in the United States for POWs who died. There's like a German war cemetery in like Arizona or Arkansas.
Wow.
I was stunned by that because it made sense that there'd be some in France and, you know, Germany and the Netherlands and Belgium, but like there are some in the United States.
Yeah.
That's why there weren't a lot of Japanese POWs, but a lot of them, if there were any, they went to Australia. I mean, so they want them as far away. You don't want any risk of POWs, you know, breaking out and joining high-ranking POWs, a lot of them were kept in England. There's like a house in Wales where they kept a bunch of German generals and stuff like that, but like standard, most of them, they were going to the United States.
They also bugged them. They would record their conversations with other prisoners and stuff and use that for intelligence gathering.
Of course, why won't they?
Well, exactly. But yeah, like let's say, you know, we're going to make some divisions out of all these German POWs from all these different services, from every walk of life, from 1940 and 1945. It's like, how are you going to make these divisions out of thin air?
You have to equip them, by the way, too, with equipment they haven't used before, not unless you're handing them back their Mausers and their MP40s.
Here's your Volksgrenadier rifle. Here's your Volkssturm thing.
Yeah, it's
Volkshandgranaten. Here's a piece of concrete with some TNT inside of it. Here you go, Grandpa.
Oh, God. Yeah, I mean, it's just not, and then it'd be tough to convince your soldiers all of a sudden, like, oh, you know how remember, like, you were shaking hands with the Soviet soldiers at Torgau on the Elbe? Yeah, now you remember they're really...
That's your sworn enemy now.
And remember that it's not like wasn't like World War II ended and all of a sudden we're like, the Soviets are bad. The late 40s were kind of a period of transition. There's still a lot of people saying, well, these were our allies.
Yeah.
You know?
And I mean, there's a lot of people who are still openly communist or socialist who would later renounce their stuff. But at the time, they don't see any problem with it. I mean, like the Soviet Union invaded Finland and did Poland and all that stuff, but they've still got a lot of very public and very positive things about them in the public mindset in America and Britain. And a lot of that you can just write off as being propaganda. Like, oh, Katyn Forest, like that didn't really happen, that kind of thing.
It did happen, by the way.
But like... and
it was the Soviets, not the Germans.
Right. The Germans have plenty of massacres to their name as well.
But that's not one of them.
Yeah, but there's a lot of people in America and Britain which then would be enemies of the state overnight.
Yeah. And also, they'd have to worry about your supply lines because France had a lot of the Maquis, you know, the French resistance were really communist groups.
Not to mention the fact that a lot of the French resistance was resisting the French resistance as well. Like they're all fighting one another.
Yeah.
The Franco-French War. But yeah, you got all these communists throughout France that at a moment's notice, that like Stalin puts out a bulletin, they're going to the train tracks and pulling up railroad ties
And there's a reason why this was never really fully considered or not. This is not serious. It's just there's no way it was going to happen. When you think about these plans, though, you have to think of it as all countries create war plans. Yes. But that doesn't mean they're really wedded to them.
For instance, there's war plan, I think it's Orange-Red, which is a U.S. war against Britain and Japan. Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen.
Well, you know, I'm sure like back in the days they had it. Yeah, it was like War Plan Red, which it was like an planned invasion of Canada and all that stuff like that. I'm sure to this day, somewhere in the Department of Defense, somewhere in the Pentagon or wherever, there are plans for military actions against basically every state in the world. Yeah. Like I'm sure there is a plan for if the U.S. ever had to conduct a military action in the UK or France. Are they serious? No, but the military is a organized planning organization. They're not just going to go, we're just winging it. That's not the way it works. Oh, we'll just wing it. No.
You're like, what's that general from How Few Remain who's just like, there is no plan.
Rosecrans,
yes.
No, you don't need a plan. Yeah. Well, I mean, of course they can think about this, but I think a lot of people even at the time were like, this is craziness. We just fought a war for almost 6 years. Why are we then going to get back into one?
Yeah. And it's not going to be a short war. It's going to be a long, grueling, total war.
Again. Yeah, this isn't some border brush fire, quick skirmish. Like this is total war again. Yeah, I mean, and I know there was conflict with communists going on. Greece, the civil war in Greece.
Yeah. That's famous because that was a conflict where it was being fought between a Western Allies backed faction and a communist faction that was not backed up by the Soviets. It was actually backed up by Yugoslavia and a couple of other random people.
Shockingly, Stalin wanted to keep his side of the word. Like we said, we won't interfere in Poland, which is remarkable that Stalin would be like, I keep my word on this one.
I think this is a mistake a lot of people make about Stalin is that they think that he's this guy who wants to turn the entire world red. He's a man with very, very specific goals. He wants his buffer zone around him, but when it comes to like the Spanish Civil War, like his arm was basically twisted into intervening in the Spanish Civil War. It's like because Trotsky was putting out all these bulletins and stuff, and it was just like, okay, fine, all right, but give me all your gold first before I do anything. I'll be needing this. Here, have some biplanes. There you go.
Yeah,
but I just don't.
It's not conceivable. There's just no way this is going to work.
Not going to work.
And I mean, why you're in the middle of fighting the last war? Why do you start a new one?
But like you talked about Baku or whatever, like even if they bomb the crap out of Baku, like how long is it going to take for them to run out of fuel? A while. Yeah. And this is the Soviet Union. This is not a free society. They can build turning soybeans into gasoline factories if they need to. They can figure that out pretty quickly if they have to.
And there's no one saying, hey, can we just stop the war? The populace is tired of it.
I'm working 18-hour days. Can I just take some time off? Can I go on vacation? No, you can't. You're going to mobilize your entire country, which is still gigantic at this point, which now includes all these other countries that used to be Axis countries a couple months ago.
Yeah.
Hungary and Romania and all that stuff.
Yeah, Poland, Slovakia,
and Eastern Germany is now occupied by you as well. So, okay, obviously the Allies are going to lose. What happens next? Because now they've like completely discredited themselves really badly. Like they started this war of aggression and got their asses kicked immediately. The world's a very crazy place after this.
I don't know. That's hard to say, but potential of hot war with the Soviet Union is high.
Well, there's no NATO, obviously, because now all of Germany's a Soviet satellite state.
Yeah. And how much of the Low Countries potentially, what do you have left? France?
Yeah, France is de Gaulle even in charge anymore. Yeah. Like Italy, yeah, exactly. Italy would switch between, Soviet.
Italy could be, who knows? I mean, the problem is that for the Soviets is that the main thrust of their advance is into Eastern Germany.
Yeah.
They don't have, their strength is not in the southern flank of the Red Army. As it advances through is not as strong. And then once it hits Yugoslavia and you have Tito and all that, it gets a little confused.
It gets a little muddy, yeah.
Interesting. But yeah, just not really feasible.
Not to mention China. Like, if suddenly, so let's say the USSR never declares war on Japan or does it like way later, what's that going to do for this Chinese Civil War? Because in real life, Chinese Civil War is over in 1949, but like, what happens if the Soviets don't intervene against the Japanese? Like, what's that going to say to Ho Chi Minh or all these other, revolutionaries?
I don't know. Probably not to their advantage. That's one arena where,
Totally crazy.
Yeah. And just would be stupid. Why do this? Why would you do this?
It's a bad idea all around, really.
Yeah.
There's a couple alternate history stories that kind of take this bent on things. Robert Conroy wrote a book called Red Inferno. I've read almost all of it. It's pretty good. I like it. But it's almost exactly this sort of thing. In his story, though, it starts while Germany is still in the war. So it starts during the drive to Berlin. There's like a clash between American and Soviet soldiers, and a war breaks out because of that, which I don't think would have happened. There was fighting between the Germans and the Soviets when they were conquering Poland, and a war didn't start based on that. So why would it start? I don't know. But
And there probably were a few incidents of friendly fire, but I mean,
Yeah. I think in Bevor's book about Berlin, they talk about a couple of American interceptor planes that got shot down by accident by Soviets for straying too far close to their sphere of influence. And Turtledove also did a book series called The Hot War, which is pretty good, which is about a nuclear war breaking out over Korea. But at that point, you're like kind of far from World War
firmly
II.
in the Cold War era. Yeah. Well, I think that's about it that we have to say on this. I think it's an interesting topic, but yeah, it's just not going to happen.
Not going to happen.
Nope.
Thankfully, this did not happen.
Thankfully, it didn't. Yeah. Well, this is Matt signing off.
And this is Max signing off.
Talk to you later, guys.